The very beginning of the electric cooperative movement sprouted in politics. Working arm in arm, forward-thinking people pulled together to raise support, raise money, raise the poles and wires to bring electricity across rural America. The members and staff of electric cooperatives continue to foster strong bonds today. The election of electric co-op boards is a democratic one, and the relationships with city and county officials, state and federal elected representatives form the building blocks for a strong movement. Speaking with a united voice, together in towns across America and in our nation's capital. Basin Electric was built to serve a membership that needed more power and the political power of the entire membership, built to serve the cooperative movement well into the future.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to open up the Government Action Report with messages from each of our North Dakota Congressional delegates, Senator John Hoeven, Senator Heidi Heitkamp, and Representative Kevin Cramer. We'll begin with Senator Hoeven. Senator Hoeven is North Dakota's 22nd U.S. Senator and began his term in 2011 after serving 10 years as the governor of North Dakota. As governor, Hoeven focused on developing North Dakota's energy resources and worked to advance the state's traditional energy resources like lignite coal, oil, and gas, and also promoted renewable energy. As Senator Hoeven has been leading efforts to develop a comprehensive national energy plan that encourages an all-the-above approach to development and includes both traditional and renewable resources. Senator Hoeven believes such an approach will lead to jobs, economic growth, and true energy security for America. Here's a message from Senator Hoeven.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation to attend your annual meeting. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. I want to start by expressing our appreciation for your efforts to provide safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. This is essential to our high quality of life and serves as a driver of our economy. Thank you for your good work. As a member of the Senate Energy and Appropriations Committees, I'm working to support you in this mission and ensure a robust energy industry for our nation. Our priorities include providing regulatory relief and building a better business climate for our energy producers. To that end, we've already rescinded the stream buffer rule and the moratorium on federal coal leasing. We're also started the process of removing the EPA's costly rules for new and existing coal generating power plants and the Waters of the U.S. rule, which I worked to defund in 2016 and 2017. At the same time, our state is building a true path forward for clean coal technology with innovative new projects like Project Tundra and the Alum Cycle, which is why we've worked to advance North Dakota's application to be the primary regulator for the geologic storage of CO2. Earlier this year, the EPA signed a proposed rule to do just that. This will allow us to reduce emissions from both traditional and renewable energy sources, which means more energy with better environmental stewardship. We're also working to ensure funding legislation supports these research and development efforts through the Department of Energy. I know federal programs like the Rural Utilities Service are also important to your operations. I'm working through my position on the Ag Committee and as chairman of the Ag Appropriations Committee to make sure that RUS meets your needs. I also continue to meet with stakeholders around the state to gather local input for the upcoming Farm Bill. These are just some of our ongoing efforts to help you continue powering our communities. Again, thank you for all that you do. Best wishes for a productive and enjoyable meeting.
Next, we'll have a message from Senator Heitkamp. United States Senator Heidi Heitkamp was the first female senator ever elected to North Dakota. As a former director of Dakota Gasification Company, Senator Heitkamp has a long record of serving as a champion for North Dakota's energy jobs and industry. She is continuing those efforts in the Senate, working to responsibly harness North Dakota's energy resources, as well as promoting an all-the-above energy plan, which she believes should serve as a model for the entire country. Let's hear from Senator Heitkamp.
Thanks to all my friends in the Basin family for once again inviting me to speak at this year's annual meeting. I had a great time last year in Bismarck, and I am really sorry I'm not able to make it out there in person this year. Also, thanks to Dale for the introduction and for his continued service to Basin and North Dakota's rural electric co-ops. During last year's meeting, we were still trying to figure out what the short-term future held for Basin and for the country's energy policy after the election. Now that we're 9 months into the Trump administration, we're gaining a lot of clarity and insight into the policy priorities for the new administration as it pertains to your industry. Overall, the news is good on the policy front. With the repeal of the stream buffer rule and the lifting of the moratorium on federal coal leasing, states like North Dakota saw immediate relief from two policies that could have severely impacted coal production and coal-fired power generation and led to higher costs for consumers. The administration has also already begun the process of reversing, revising, or rolling back the Clean Power Plan, a plan that I fought from the very beginning because North Dakota was not getting a fair shake. This plan would have inflicted great harm on coal generation in North Dakota, and it would have driven up costs for your members across the board in our state and in our region. North Dakotans come to the table repeatedly with ideas and options that could have resulted in drastic reductions in carbon emissions, but these ideas were ignored in the previous administration and in the final rule. While all of us are in agreement that the Clean Power Plan must go, it's important that we not trade long-term pain for long-term uncertainty. When I was at a meeting last November, virtually the entire room agreed that the challenges of a carbon-constrained future and customer demand for reduced emissions and cleaner energy options are going to persist, regardless of which party controls the White House or which party controls Congress. It's critical that we take this time that we have, which is really a reprieve from the onerous Clean Power Plan, to work on putting a pragmatic, long-term carbon emissions reduction plan in place that will provide the energy industry with long-term certainty. Part of thinking about the future is to put ideas on the table that foster discussion and debate, and hopefully that will lead to better policies. I believe that is what Secretary Perry is trying to do with his grid resiliency pricing request that is very well-intentioned. Coal and nuclear will continue to serve a unique and vitally important role in the reliability and resiliency of our nation's electrical grid. However, the guidance that has been sent over to FERC seems a bit short-sighted and crafted without meaningful consultation and would not benefit North Dakota co-ops. I still believe that technology is the path forward for coal-fired power. North Dakota is already looking at 2 separate carbon capture projects, and my bill to extend and reform the 45Q tax credit, called the Future Act, has strong bipartisan support, has an amazing list of co-sponsors and supporters, and has already brought together some very unlikely alliances and allies. Our energy bill and 45Q, the Future Act, has shown that there is willingness from all sides to come together and seek realistic solutions, and that ultimately is going to be the solution for the industry and good for our country. While we work towards these technological advances, it's important that we focus on the assets that we already have in place. That's why I've been working with my colleagues on a potential legislation to address issues with new source review, the new source review that prevents facilities from further upgrading their existing equipment, and that we work on possible adjustments to the refined coal tax credit to provide further incentives to increase efficiencies and reduce emissions at coal-fired power plants without the need for expensive retrofits. I know how important Basin Electric is. I know how important the work is that you do, not only to agriculture in our region, but to the economy of our states. So good luck to all of you, and thank you for letting me have just a few minutes with you.
And finally, let's hear from Representative Kevin Cramer. Representative Cramer was elected to the U.S. House in 2012. He serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, which has the broadest jurisdiction of any committee in Congress. He is also assigned to 3 subcommittees: Communications and Technology, Energy, and the Environment. When he was elected to the North Dakota Public Service Commission in 2004, he worked to ensure North Dakotans enjoy some of the lowest utility rates in the nation, enhancing their competitive position in the global marketplace. An energy policy expert, Representative Cramer understands our country's energy security is integral to our nation and economic security. So let's hear from Representative Cramer.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you since the swamp is in session. The House, I'm sorry. We're busy, fortunately, working to simplify your tax code. We want to put more money in the hands of the American people, imagine that, and to stop incentivizing businesses to move their operations overseas. Early on in this Congress, we tried to help him as much as we could by using the Congressional Review Act to eliminate regulations that were finalized in the waning days of the Obama administration, including some that are pretty important to the energy industry. In February of this year, a resolution disapproving the stream protection rule made it through both chambers of Congress. I was honored to be with the President at his side when he signed it into law. This one-size-fits-all rewrite of coal mining regulations would have created massive problems for our coal miners, stranded coal resources, and ultimately would have increased electricity costs for consumers and, of course, for your members. Unfortunately, not all of the energy-related Congressional Review Act resolutions passed both chambers of Congress. In seeking broader regulatory reform, the House passed the Regulatory Accountability Act on January 11th of this year, which combines 6 previously passed reform-minded bills to eliminate overly burdensome red tape and regulations in order to lift unnecessary burdens on hard-working Americans and to promote jobs, innovation, and economic growth. A companion bill has had a hearing in the Senate, but no further action. Other regulatory relief bills that passed in the House include the Midnight Rules Relief Act, which passed the House on January 4th. The Senate companion was approved by the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee on a straight party line vote and awaits a floor vote. The REINS Act, that's the Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act, passed on January 5th. Now, this bill would increase accountability for and transparency in the federal regulatory process by requiring Congress to approve all new major regulations, just like we do in the state of North Dakota. The Senate companion bill was approved by the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, again on a straight party line vote, but it awaits a vote by the whole body. The Small Business Regulatory Flexibility Improvement Act passed the House on January 11th, and the Senate companion was, yes, approved by Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, again on a straight party line vote. It'd be impossible to exaggerate how important it was that President Trump lifted the Obama moratorium on federal coal leases and the overreaching Clean Power Plan. The checkerboard chaos created by the first, it's a job killer that threatened the efficiency of our producers right here in North Dakota and many of the places where you get your fuel, and of course around the country. The Clean Power Plan would have significantly increased electricity prices, put grid reliability at risk, and no other state in the Union was under attack more than North Dakota. Speaking of reliability and resilience, I commend Energy Secretary Perry for bringing action to the conversation on the premature closure of baseload power plants. We all understand the importance of that. We must have a formula at the state and federal levels that attribute appropriate value to baseload electricity. I never cease being amazed at how little regard, or frankly even understanding, that many policymakers have for the importance of 24/7 electricity. I fear it's going to take a crisis to wake some people up. I'm also working to ensure that America leads as the energy innovators in the world. Focusing the Department of Energy on real-world problems identified by industry, we can continue to produce energy cleaner and more cost-effective, improving our environment and our economy. These technology solutions can then be exported to our allies, enhancing our national security and improving their living standards. You, of course, at Basin Electric are at the center of finding and demonstrating these solutions, including the game-changing alum cycle, a zero-emission, net water-producing coal plant delivering cost-competitive electricity is within our grasp if the right policies are in place and the rules aren't stacked against the innovators. Imagine the possibilities. In fact, just today, as I record this, on this very day, I was able to put together a meeting in my office with the Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dan Burlett, a good friend of mine, a number of his undersecretaries and his Chief of Staff, staff, meeting with members of the various G&T cooperatives, including, of course, Basin Electric's own Dale Niezwaag. They had an important discussion about these technologies, about the extension of tax credits, as we're talking about tax policy, the importance of the resiliency and grid reliability studies and resiliency pricing mechanism that we've sent now over to FERC, and of course I've been commenting in favor of our baseload fuels, as well as, of course, the Department of Energy's grant programs that Basin Electric and the others have used so effectively to find the solutions that we seek. You know, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this message with you in this format and to serve in the United States Congress. Thanks for helping me do that. Thanks for being so accessible to me so that I can learn more about how to better serve you. I hope you have a productive annual meeting, and remember, it's always good to be us.
Well, it's hard to believe it was just a year ago was election day, and with the change of administration, it's created a really busy year for government relations. We spent the year attending a lot of meetings for elected officials, for agency officials in D.C. and in the state. We ended up responding to quite a few requests for proposals, for input on regulations that needed to be revised. So it has been incredibly busy, and we internally at Basin have been working together with our legal department, our environmental department, and government relations to put these documents together, to come up with this information and send it out. So again, I think it's great that we have the opportunity to provide the input and try to get some change in the federal level. The meeting that Representative Cramer mentioned, I also want to put a little shout out to Great River Energy and Dakota Power. Great River Energy was instrumental in setting that meeting up, those series of meetings up, and it shows what we try to do in North Dakota. When we can, we try to work together with the other G&Ts to come up with a common position, because again, just like the co-ops, we can show strength going in as a group. As you've heard, every one of the congressional delegation talked about the repeal of the Clean Power Plan, and that was October 16th when they officially announced that that was going to happen. Now, EPA has come up with a change in the legal interpretation of the Clean Air Act. So what they've done now is EPA is saying that as an agency, we are allowed to change and regulate what goes on at the power plant itself. So kind of an inside the fence type mentality. On the previous administration, they were looking more at a series or systems with control of emissions. So they were more dictating what plants you could run, what fuels you should use, and EPA is going back to what we would consider a really strict interpretation of the Clean Air Act and talking about controlling and regulating what happens inside the fence. Now, what EPA is going to do, they have got this repeal going, and what we're going to do is provide comments on that. After that repeal is done, what they will do is issue an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. And that will be our time to submit comments to EPA saying, here's what we think a new carbon management rule should look like. So as this process moves forward, we get that chance to respond. Now, Basin is preparing those comments to address that rule, but as we come forward to try and figure out what we're going to come up with, we don't know exactly when EPA is going to announce that advance notice of proposed rulemaking. So we're trying to get our ducks in a row and get our positions set down so then when that does come out, we're ready to respond. Now, as we work on this, again, we're working internally to develop Basin's position. When we've got that position solidified, we'll make sure that we get that information out to all of you so you're prepared to talk about it if you need to. We're also working with the regional G&Ts to see if we can all come together as a common position, and we're working with NRECA as they work to develop a national position. And as you can figure, with NRECA, they've got a bigger job in front of them, trying to get all of the G&Ts in the United States with all kinds of different power plants together and come up with a position that will work, that they can promote. As you also heard with the presentations, another issue we're working on is new source review. And for those of you who remember, new source review is a rule that is out there that says if you make a number of changes or certain changes to an existing power plant, EPA can come in and say, you have made so many modifications that you now have to upgrade your emission systems equal to that of a brand new plant. So that threat out there has really caused a lot of utilities not to make improvements. In fact, we've heard stories of utilities will not put in the latest technology equipment for fear of tripping new source review. So we're working with a couple of different areas to try and get that done. EPA themselves, under Administrator Pruitt, has set up a task force internally within EPA, and they are looking at 3 different issues. Back in 2002, 2003, the Bush administration had proposed a change or modification to the new source review rule that they approved, but was struck down by the courts. So EPA is looking at that rule, saying, okay, can we revise, can we modify that, and move that forward? The second area they're looking at is, can we make changes either administratively or through guidelines that will tweak the new source review rule without tripping a full-blown rewrite? And the third option is just going with a full rewrite of the rule. If they go down with the full rewrite of the rule, then they're going to have to go the process, same process we've seen with the Clean Power Plan, where you've got to issue a proposed rule, take comment, issue a final rule, and then go through the court challenge process. So, and that's a multi-year process should they go with the new rule. So they're trying to see if they can do some things to change the rule without going with the full-blown rule if they can. The other action that's going on in new source review is a legislative action. There's been 2 bills introduced in the House by a representative out of Virginia trying to make changes through legislation. The one bill talks about changing the way the new source evaluation method, or the test, the emissions test, is done and evaluated. The second bill that's out there tries to set up an exemption for efficiency projects. So if you're putting a project into your power plant that increases the efficiency, it wouldn't trip the new source review rule. Basin Electric is working both with EPA and on the legislative side to try and promote those activities and move those forward. Moving on to the Department of Energy, they've also been very active in issues that we are interested in. As it was brought up in the videos, in September 29th, the DOE issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to FERC to talk about getting new pricing rules for baseload energy. Now, the interesting thing about this is DOE can't implement that rule. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, they're the only ones that have authority over RTOs like SPP and MISO. So the DOE can send this over to FERC, and then FERC decides if they want to approve it, if they want to deny it, or what they want to do with it. So we'll see what happens on that part of it. When DOE sent that rule over, they issued several qualifications. So if you've got a plant, there's several criteria you have to meet if you were to qualify for getting compensated for different things in your costs. But one of the things that they offered, they said you have to have a 90-day fuel supply on site. Now, with most of our plants, we don't carry a 90-day fuel supply of coal. Some cases we can. LRS has the space to do that, but they didn't kind of expand on that because our question is, what about the mine mouth plants we have in North Dakota? Definitely more than a 90-day supply, not exactly on site, but usually within a quarter of a mile. So we didn't know for sure whether we would qualify for that or not. We thought we could make changes to get that done. The second thing they talked about was it had to be compliant with all federal regulations. We meet that one. They said it could not be subject to cost of service rate regulations by a state or local authority. We looked into that rule, and that's a real gray area because we didn't know how they would view the local board of directors, which sets the rates for it. So unknown whether we would qualify for that. The last thing they talked about was that it had to be the RTO that you belong, it had to belong to an RTO, number one, and then number two, they added a couple days later, said, does your RTO have an energy and capacity market? In SPP, they don't have a capacity market. MISO has a voluntary capacity market, and what we were told is that neither RTO would qualify under those rules. Now, a reason everybody got pretty excited about looking into that was the generous package that they offered for getting your cost recovery. They said, if this goes through and you qualify, You can add in your operating and fuel expenses. You can put in your cost of capital and your debt. You can put in a fair return on equity and investment. So it was pretty much everything with the kitchen and the kitchen sink thrown in to get those costs back. Now, as we went and read a lot of articles, talked to other utilities, everyone was under the same impression that the proposal, it was good that we were talking about it, but the proposal went way too far. To throw all those costs in there was just going to create more problems in the marketplace than it was going to solve. So everyone pretty much had that same conclusion. So where did we come out of this with Basin? We did submit comments by the October 23rd deadline talking about how we felt about the rule. And we really kind of highlighted some comments that we had given to the DOE and Secretary Perry earlier that spring when he wanted input on what they could do to make the grid more resilient. So we were able to use those, and in that letter in the spring, we did directly address this issue of baseload pricing. So end up with Basin's position that we sent into FERC was this, that number one, we do appreciate the DOE and FERC looking at this issue. We've been talking for it for several years. We thought that it was going to take a couple years to even bring this issue to the forefront. With them, with the DOE bringing it up, it put it right up there probably a couple years ahead of schedule. We do agree that we don't think that markets properly compensate baseload generation for the 24/7 power they provide and the other ancillary services that are out there. The proposal went too far, but we feel that the RTO should have the ability to address this issue and find out ways that work for their RTO to make it happen. Our final request was that DOE reject that offer, but open up a rulemaking and talk about this issue, allow everyone to study it, provide input, and let them go through a formal rulemaking process so everyone gets a chance to hear what the issues are and come up with a workable solution. Another issue that we were looking at is what they call PURPA, or the Public Utilities Regulatory Policy Act. And this is an act that has been in place since 1978. And the rule was put in, or the law was passed, to help renewable energy resources. At that time, what they wanted to make sure would happen is that renewable energy projects would have access to transmission and to markets, and that they would be guaranteed a price for their product. And as we all know, things are a whole lot different now in 2017 than they were in 1978. Renewable energy is not a budding new resource. It is an established resource that's out there. There is a proliferation of energy markets that are out there, and availability to get power to market is not a problem that it might have been in 1978. So with Basin's position, what we're looking at with this rule is that we don't feel PURPA is needed anymore. We don't think that utilities should be forced to buy power that they don't need and provide a guaranteed price for that. The other problem that's come up is there's been several changes in PURPA from 1978 to try and reflect the times that are going on. A couple of the rules that were put in, one of them was said, if your project is above 20 megawatts, it wouldn't qualify for PURPA. And also, if to be out of separate projects, they had to be at least a mile apart to try and make separations. The problem that we've seen is there's some developers, not all, but there are some, that will purposely take a large project, cut it up into 20 megawatt or less segments, place them a mile apart, just to avoid having to go through a process of a long-term power supply contract and just get the PURPA rate. So there's been a lot of manipulation, not a lot, there's been some manipulation of the rule that we think needs to be addressed. Finally, the big issue that's going on, you're probably reading about it in the paper right now, is that Congress is finally focused on tax reform. And in the tax reform bill, there are several issues that we've been working on for the last couple of years to try and get passed regarding tax. And it looks now that the tax reform, some form of tax reform, is going to get passed. So everyone is very eager to provide input and get their portion of tax reform into this bill to get it to move forward. An area that we're really focused on is Section 45. And Section 45 of the tax code talks about how you use and how you use and get incentives for CO2, reducing CO2 and other emissions from power plants. Now, the North Dakota delegation has been fully engaged in this. In fact, every one of our congressional delegation is either sponsoring or co-sponsoring bills related to Section 45. Senator Hoeven and Congressman Cramer have a bill regarding Section 45 that tries to match up the regulations that the IRS has and the EPA. The EPA has rules that say if you're going to sequester, here's a certain type of well you need to use and a certain type of monitoring practices you have to use once you sequester. If you're going to use CO2 for enhanced oil recovery, there's a certain well type you use and monitoring requirements. Now the IRS comes in and kind of cross-pollinates between the two. So you could be doing EOR and have to follow the rules for sequestration. So what the Hoeven and Cramer bill do is line those two up so that they both match up, saying if you're going to do enhanced oil recovery, here's the well you use. You're going to use sequestration, here's the well and monitoring practices you use. Now, Senator Heitkamp mentioned her Future Act. The Future Act does a couple things, but unrelated to what they're trying to do with the IRS and EPA rules. Her bill does a couple things. It increases the credit that's available for using CO2, and it also allows an easier use of CO2, an easier way to get access to the credit. The way the bill is right now, if we're going to use CO2 for enhanced oil recovery and qualify for the credits that are out there, we would have to own the power plant and own the oil field. And Senator Heitkamp's bill separates that too, so one party can own the power plant, one party can own the field, and you'll still use the credit. And with Senator Heitkamp's bill, there's a companion bill also in the House, and Representative Cramer is a co-sponsor on that bill. Another bill that we talked about and that came up was talking about refined coal. And with refined coal, there are credits that you can get if you use a process to coal that will reduce your nitrous oxide by at least 20% and reduces your mercury and sulfur dioxide by 40%. Now, we use this credit at the Antelope Valley Station, at the Leland Old Station, and the Laramie River Station, and we've been using that credit for probably the past 7-8 years. Now, this credit is only a 10-year credit, and it's set to expire. Great River Energy also uses this credit in their power plants, and so does Dakota. So we've got all three of the co-ops using this credit. Great River Energy has taken the lead to try and push for an extension of the 10-year, which is going to sunset around 2020, to try and move that on. So those are the main bills that we're looking at in the tax package, the Section 45 and the refined coal. Good news, bad news. These bills, our provisions, were not in the House version of the bill, of the tax reform bill that's coming out or being worked on by the Ways and Means Committee. Be that as it may, on the Senate side, we've got the Senate delegation working to include that on the bill once it gets over to their side. So we're hopeful that we're disappointed that it didn't make the House bill. We're hopeful that we can get something put into the Senate bill and then work on it in a conference committee after that point. Now, the House bill did have a surprising twist in it, something that was totally unexpected by a lot of people, and that is the House bill took a couple of pretty hard swipes at renewable energy. One of the things that it did is took away the inflation adjustment ability of the production tax credit. Now, when the PTC started for renewable energy, they were $1.50 a kilowatt hour. Through inflation, they have grown to be 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. The legislation as proposed will knock that back down to $1.50. Another thing they did is they removed the safe harbor provision. What the renewable energy folks were able to do up to this point was if they invested 5% in a project, say they bought turbine blades early and had them designated for a project, they could consider that project started and qualify for 100% of the tax credit, even if it starts to phase out. This bill, the proposals in the House bill, would remove the safe harbor ability on that. Now again, this is simply a proposal in the Ways and Means Committee bill in the House, and it really, I gotta tell you, it lit a lot of people up when this was figured out about last Friday. So we're seeing a lot of people come out against that bill. In fact, there was an article just today where we had Senator Thune out of South Dakota, Senator Grassi out of Iowa, speaking against the reductions in the renewable energy side. So those provisions are going to face a pretty tough battle, I think, on the Senate side as we get there. Now, those are the issues that we're working on. Like I said, there's been a lot of activity. Basin has been very active in all of these bills, all these proposals, all these comments. We'll continue to do so, and we will do our best to keep you informed of things as they progress. And we just really want to thank everyone for their support. We'll do our best to keep you informed. If you have questions, please don't hesitate at any time to give us a call. Thank you very much.